He had hired the best home nurse his money could find, but he had never once asked his dying father what he was afraid of. Owen Baxter pulled into the driveway of his childhood home on a Tuesday afternoon, with a trunk full of groceries he would never cook, and a calendar already filling up again by Thursday. He had not planned to stop. He was supposed to drive past, the way you drive past a gas station when you still have half a tank, out of habit, out of the comfortable lie that things were being handled. But his assistant had forwarded a note from the home health agency. A scheduling conflict. The overnight nurse could not come until Wednesday. Someone needed to check in. Someone. That was how he had started thinking about his own presence. As someone. Owen sat in the car for a moment with the engine off. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding, dark green shutters, a wooden porch that had needed repainting for 3 years. His father, Harold Baxter, had always said he would get to it in spring. Spring had come and gone twice since the diagnosis. Owen got out, unlocked the front door and called out from the hallway. No answer. He walked through the living room, past the bookshelf his father had built by hand in 1987, past the side table with the framed photographs that Owen had stopped really seeing years ago. The house smelled like something he couldn't immediately name. Then he recognized it. Soup, homemade soup. The kind his mother used to make on cold Sundays when Owen was a boy. His mother had been gone for 11 years. He followed the smell to the kitchen doorway and stopped. Renata Cruz, the daytime aide, was standing at the stove stirring something in a pot. She was young, late 20s maybe, with her dark hair pulled back and a dish towel draped over her shoulder. She was humming very quietly. Not a song Owen recognized, just a sound. The kind of sound people make when they are comfortable somewhere. His father sat at the kitchen table. Harold Baxter, 71 years old and 70 pounds lighter than Owen remembered him, was sitting up straight with a mug of something warm between his hands. He was watching Renata stir the soup, and he was smiling. Not the polite, careful smile he gave Owen on the phone when Owen asked how he was doing. Something else. Something looser. Owen stood in the doorway long enough to feel like a stranger in a house he had grown up in. Then Harold looked over. The smile changed. Not disappeared, just shifted. Rearranged itself into the version his father wore for him. Owen, Harold said, I didn't know you were coming. The agency sent a note, Owen said. About Wednesday. Renata mentioned that. It's fine, I can manage one night. Renata glanced over her shoulder briefly. Hello, Mr. Baxter, she said, using his last name the way the agency required. Then she turned back to the stove. Owen looked at the pot, then at his father's mug. What is that soup? Harold said simply. Where did it come from? A small pause. Renata kept stirring. She made it, Harold said. Owen set his keys on the counter. That's not part of her job description. Neither of them responded right away. Harold brought the mug to his lips. Renata lowered the heat on the burner. The kitchen stayed quiet except for the soft sound of the spoon against the pot. Well, Harold said eventually, it's a good thing she didn't check the description before she started then. Owen almost said something. Instead he excused himself and went to find something to do in another room. He told himself it was the drive. He told himself he was tired. But the truth was smaller and harder to hold. He had walked into his father's kitchen and felt like a guest. And the person stirring soup on the stove had looked like she belonged there. He did not know what to do with that. He was still sitting in the living room 20 minutes later when Renata appeared in the doorway. She had taken off the dish towel. She held her bag over one shoulder, her jacket folded over one arm. He's settled at the table, she said. Soup's in the pot. He usually has it around 6. Sometimes he doesn't finish it, but it helps with the nausea if he eats a little something. Owen nodded. Thank you. She started to leave, then stopped. Turned back. The crackers in the upper cabinet, she said. The plain ones. He likes them broken into pieces, not whole. He won't ask you to break them, but he'll eat more if you do. He won't ask? He doesn't like to feel like he needs things, Renata said, so he goes without instead of asking. The sentence landed somewhere specific. Owen recognized it. He had grown up watching Harold Baxter do exactly that. The man had worked 2 jobs for 6 years without once telling Owen they were struggling. He had worn the same coat for a decade and called it his favorite. How do you know that? Owen asked. Renata's expression was even not unkind. I pay attention, she said. She left. Owen sat with the quiet. Through the kitchen doorway he could hear his father moving carefully. The soft drag of the chair. The clink of the spoon against the pot. Harold Baxter, who had once carried Owen on his shoulders through a state fair and called it nothing. Who had taught Owen to drive in an empty parking lot on a February morning without once raising his voice. Harold Baxter was now in the kitchen breaking crackers by himself and hoping no one noticed. Owen went to the cabinet. He found the crackers. He broke several into pieces on a small plate and carried it to the table without saying anything about it. His father looked at the plate for a moment. Then he picked up a piece without a word. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just existing in the same room in the way they had mostly stopped doing. She makes the soup from scratch, Harold said eventually. Owen looked up. She brings the vegetables herself. From the farmer's market on Maple Street. Harold stared into his mug. I told her she didn't have to. She said she knew. Owen didn't answer. She brings her mother's recipe. Harold's voice was quieter now. She told me her mother passed a few years ago. Cervical cancer. He paused. She said her mother loved soup in the afternoons too. The kitchen was very still. She told you that? Owen asked. Harold nodded slowly. She talks to me, Owen. He said it simply with no accusation in his voice. That was what made it land so hard. Not at me, not about my vitals or my medications. She talks to me like I'm still a person with things on my mind. Owen looked down at the table. I know you're busy, Harold said. Not as an excuse, as a fact he had already filed away somewhere and made his peace with. That mercy was worse than anger. Owen drove home that night and did not sleep well. He told himself the situation was under control. He told himself his father had everything he needed. The agency, the night nurse twice a week, the oncologist with the good reputation, the pharmacy on auto refill, the direct deposit set up so Harold never had to worry about the bills. Owen had built a system around his father's illness. It was thorough and it was professional, and it had let him stop wondering if things were okay because the system said they were. But systems did not know about crackers. Systems did not know that Harold Baxter would go without rather than ask. Owen sat at his kitchen table at 1 a.m. staring at his phone with the agency's number pulled up on the screen. He had been meaning to call and request longer hours for the daytime aide. He had been meaning to do it for 6 weeks. He put the phone face down. He did not call the agency. He called his father instead. Harold picked up on the third ring, which meant he had not been asleep. Owen. His voice was careful. Is something wrong? No, I just... Owen stopped. He did not know how to finish the sentence in a way that would not sound like what it was. I wanted to ask how you were doing. A pause. You called the house last Sunday, I know, and Thursday, I know. Owen pressed his hand flat on the table. Dad, are you sleeping? A longer pause. Some. What does some mean? Harold was quiet for a moment. It means the nights are longer than they used to be. Owen's throat tightened. There's always some of that. That's not an answer. No, Harold agreed. I suppose it's not. He sounded tired but not defeated. More like a man choosing his words from a limited supply. The pain comes and goes. What's harder is the quiet. Owen did not know what to say to that. You get used to a house with noise in it, Harold said. Your mother was always doing something, even at night. I could hear her turning pages in the other room. His voice settled lower. Now when I wake up at 3 a.m. the house is very still. And it gets bigger, the stillness, if that makes sense. It made more sense than Owen wanted it to. I could come Thursday, Owen said. Another pause, shorter this time. You don't have to do that, Harold said. I know I don't have to. Harold was quiet. Owen could hear him breathing carefully on the other end of the line. Thursday's fine, his father said finally. Owen came Thursday, and Friday and the following Tuesday. He did not announce it to anyone. He did not reschedule meetings, not at first. He came early or stayed late or rerouted on the way home from the office. He told himself he was just checking in. That was the word he used. Checking. As though his father were an item on a list. But by the third week something had shifted and Owen knew it had nothing to do with the list. He began to notice things he had missed before. The way Harold held his coffee cup with both hands even when it was only half full. Because his grip had grown unreliable. The way he tilted his head slightly to the right when he was concentrating. Trying to hear better. Through the hearing loss that had crept in, over the last year, and that Harold had never mentioned to Owen directly. The way he still set 2 placemats at the dinner table, one for himself, one out of habit or memory or hope. Owen never asked which. He began to understand that there was a Harold Baxter the system had been monitoring, and there was a Harold Baxter who set 2 placemats. He had only ever seen paperwork from the first one. Renata noticed the change. Owen could tell because she stopped treating him like a guest who might startle easily. She began telling him things while she gathered her bag at the end of the day. Small operational things, the kind of things you pass along to someone you've decided to trust. He didn't want to use the shower chair today, she said one afternoon. He used it anyway after a while. Don't bring it up. He doesn't want to talk about needing it. Owen nodded. How do you get him to do things he doesn't want to do? Renata thought about that for a moment. I don't, mostly. I just stay close enough that when he changes his mind, there's someone there. She said it the way people say things that are obvious to them, and they don't realize aren't obvious to everyone else. Owen thought about it the whole drive home. The confrontation, if it could be called that, came on a Wednesday in the second month. Owen arrived to find his sister's car in the driveway. Cassandra Baxter, 4 years older than Owen, lived 45 minutes away and called their father every Sunday with the precision of someone meeting a contractual obligation. She and Owen were not unfriendly. They were simply distant in the particular way of siblings who had dealt with grief differently and never discussed it. He found her in the living room. His father was resting in the back bedroom. Renata was in the kitchen. Cassandra looked up when Owen walked in. She was wearing the expression she wore when she had decided something and was waiting to tell him. I've been looking into facilities, she said. Owen set his jacket on the chair. He doesn't want to go to a facility. What he wants and what's sustainable are 2 different things. Cassandra had a way of speaking that made everything sound like a consensus she had already reached without you. You can't be here every other day indefinitely. And this Aide. She glanced toward the kitchen. Owen, she's a home health worker. She's not a nurse, she's not trained for what's coming. She's been with him for 7 months. That doesn't make her qualified. Owen looked at the kitchen doorway. From inside came the sound of running water, then the quiet clink of something being set on the counter. She brings vegetables from the farmer's market, Owen said. She makes him soup from her mother's recipe. She knows he won't ask for things, so she brings them before he has to ask. He paused. She knows he sets 2 placemats. Cassandra blinked. What? He still sets 2 placemats at dinner for Mom. A silence. Cassandra's composure shifted slightly. Just slightly. I didn't know that, she said. Neither did I, Owen said. Renata told me. His sister looked at the kitchen doorway, then back at him. She's an employee, Cassandra said, but something in her voice had changed. It was quieter, less certain. She's the person who's been here, Owen said. Not as an accusation, just as a fact, the way Harold had said it about Owen's absence. Plainly, without drama, in a way that could not be argued with. And she noticed things neither of us noticed because neither of us was paying attention. Cassandra said nothing for a long moment. I'm not saying the facility idea is wrong forever, Owen said. But right now he's home, and he wants to be home. And the person who has made that possible is in that kitchen. He looked at his sister. I'm not interested in making that harder for her. Cassandra picked up her bag. She did not leave angry. She left quietly, which was in some ways more unsettling. At the door she stopped. Call me, she said. If something changes. I will. She left. Owen stood in the living room for a moment, then he went to the kitchen. Renata was washing the last of the dishes. She did not look up immediately. I heard some of that, she said. I figured. I'm not trying to replace anyone, she said. Her voice was steady. I want to be clear about that. I'm not trying to be family, I know that. She turned off the water, dried her hands, turned to face him with the dish towel in her hands the way she often held it, like something to do with her hands when she needed to think clearly. But sometimes a family needs someone who isn't family, she said, someone who isn't afraid. She paused. You love him. Your sister loves him. That's exactly why it's hard for you to sit with him through the hard parts. Because losing him will cost you something. It doesn't cost me in the same way. She folded the towel carefully. So I can sit in the hard parts without needing them to be something different than what they are. Owen leaned against the counter. The kitchen smelled like soup and dish soap. Is that why you stayed late last Thursday? He asked. When I couldn't come? A pause. He was having a difficult night, Renata. Your shift ended at 5. She set the towel down. I know when my shift ends. The agency doesn't know you stayed. I didn't stay for the agency. Owen looked at her. She met his gaze without apology, without pride, just steadiness. He had a fever, she said. It broke around 9. He fell asleep in the chair. I didn't want to move him and I didn't want to leave until I was sure he'd make it through the night comfortably. She picked up her bag. He did. Owen was quiet. What does he talk about? Owen asked. On the nights like that, when it's just the two of you. Renata considered the question for a long moment. You, she said. Owen looked at her. He talks about you a lot, about when you were young. She smiled faintly. He talks about a camping trip you took when you were 8. He says you cried the whole first night because you thought you heard a bear. Owen laughed once before he could stop himself. There was a bear. He says there wasn't. He's wrong. Renata smiled. He says that trip is one of his favorite memories. Owen looked at the floor. He remembered that trip. He had hated it. He had hated the tent and the cold and the mosquitoes and the dark. He had complained the entire drive home. He had not once wondered if his father was making a memory. He talks about your mother a lot too, Renata said, softer now. He misses her in a very specific way. Not just as a person, as a presence in rooms. She paused. He says the house is a different shape without her. The kitchen felt very still. He said that to you, Owen said. He doesn't have anyone else to say it to, she said, not as a criticism. As a simple accounting of what had been available. Owen looked at the placemats on the table. 2 of them, just as Renata had said, set with the same care as if both seats would be filled. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Tell me what he needs, Owen said. Not medically, I have the medical. Tell me what he actually needs. Renata set her bag back on the counter. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down too. He needs someone to eat dinner with him, she said. He needs someone to ask him about his life like he's still in the middle of it, not wrapping it up. He needs someone who will argue with him about baseball. She tilted her head slightly. Do you know who he thinks should have won the series in '08? He brings that up constantly, Owen said. Then you know what to do with 45 minutes. Owen almost smiled. He needs to know you're not afraid of him, Renata said. Not afraid of what's happening to him. He's protecting you because he thinks seeing his fear will be too hard for you. So he hides it. She looked at him steadily. And when he hides it, he carries it alone. The words went somewhere deep. My father has been carrying things alone his whole life, Owen said. I know, that's not something I can fix in a weekend. No, she agreed. But you can sit down next to it. You can let him know you're not going to leave the room when it gets harder. She looked at the table. He doesn't need you to fix it. He stopped expecting that a while ago. He just needs to know you're not going to disappear. Owen absorbed that in silence. Has he said that? Owen asked. That he's afraid I'll disappear? Renata was quiet for a moment. He said he worries you'll remember him as the sick version, she said. That the last thing you'll have is this. She looked up. He wants you to remember the camping trip too, even if you thought there was a bear. The laugh that came out of Owen was wet at the edges. He stayed for dinner that night. He broke the crackers into pieces without being asked. Harold ate more than usual, or maybe Owen was just paying closer attention. They argued about the series for 40 minutes. Harold was wrong and Owen told him so, and Harold told him his memory was faulty, and for a while the kitchen sounded like it had a long time ago. 2 people in it, both of them fully present. When Harold's energy flagged, Owen noticed before his father had to say anything. He brought the blanket from the couch to the chair where Harold was sitting, the way Renata had shown him without showing him. Just by doing it herself often enough that Owen had absorbed the motion. Harold looked at the blanket, then at Owen. You're learning, he said. From a good teacher, Owen said. Harold glanced toward the kitchen, even though Renata had left 2 hours before. She's a remarkable young woman. She is her mother raised her well. Owen thought about that. A woman who had died of cancer a few years ago, who had never met Harold Baxter, whose soup recipe was now simmering in his father's kitchen on Tuesday afternoons. Love moved in strange directions. It didn't always end where it started, Dad, Owen said. Harold looked at him. What are you afraid of? The question sat between them. Harold held Owen's gaze for a long moment. Then he looked toward the window, where the evening light had gone gray and soft. I'm afraid it'll hurt more than I can stand, Harold said. Toward the end, Owen did not look away. I'm afraid the house will go to someone who won't know what it took to keep it. Harold said. I'm afraid. He stopped, his jaw moved. I'm afraid I didn't tell your mother enough. That she spent years assuming I felt things as I never said out loud. He looked back at Owen. I'm afraid I did the same thing with you. Owen's eyes stung. You didn't, Owen said. I wasn't here enough when you were in your 20s, Harold said. I was working. I told myself it was for you. Most of it was for me. The work was easier than not knowing what to say. The kitchen was very quiet. I know the feeling, Owen said. Harold looked at him for a long time. Something passed between them, not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but something that made room for it. I'm here now, Owen said. Harold reached across the table and put his hand over Owen's. It felt lighter than it used to. Smaller. But the weight of it was not less. If anything, it was more. I know you are, Harold said. That was the night Owen called his assistant and moved 3 meetings. He did not cancel them all at once. He did not make a speech about priorities. He simply moved them, the way you move things when you understand that some windows close and do not reopen. And that later is a word that only works when you're certain there is one. He came 3 times a week after that. Sometimes 4. He brought things Renata had mentioned in passing. The specific brand of peppermint tea Harold liked. The kind with the cardboard box, not the tin. The crossword books with the larger print. A recording of a baseball broadcast from 1986 that Harold had mentioned once, and Owen had spent an afternoon tracking down. Harold pretended to be surprised each time. Owen let him. He learned slowly and imperfectly, the way Renata had learned, by paying attention, by being present long enough for things to become obvious that could not be read in a chart. He learned that Harold slept better on nights when someone had talked to him in the evening. Not about his condition, but about anything else. He learned that Harold still found things funny and that the surest way to bring out the real smile, the loose one, not the careful one, was to get the baseball argument going again. He learned that his father cried once, alone, in the bathroom, and said nothing about it afterward. And that the right response was to simply be in the kitchen when Harold came out, so that the silence was companionable rather than empty. He learned these things from Renata. Not through instruction, through observation, through watching someone who was not afraid practice love as a form of attention. One afternoon, maybe 6 weeks after the night of the first real conversation, Owen arrived to find Renata sitting beside Harold in the living room. She had a small notebook open. Harold was dictating something, slowly. Owen stopped in the doorway. Is this the part about the Ford? Renata was asking. Or the part about the garage?
Ford,
Harold said. The garage comes later, okay. She wrote something down. Owen stayed in the doorway long enough to understand what he was seeing. His father was telling his life, and Renata was writing it down. He did not interrupt. He went to the kitchen and made coffee. Badly, then less badly, with the specific ratio Renata had left written on a notacard above the machine. He brought 3 cups. He sat down across from his father without asking what they were doing. Harold looked at the coffee, then at Owen. Then he continued his story. Owen listened. He did not look at his phone. He learned that Harold had wanted to be an architect before circumstances made that impossible. He learned that Harold and his mother had danced at their wedding to a song Owen had never heard. And that Harold still remembered the exact way she had looked mid-law, when he stepped on her foot. He learned that the camping trip had almost not happened, because Harold had booked the wrong dates. driven to the wrong site, and turned it into an adventure rather than admit the mistake. He learned that Harold had been afraid Owen would find out and think less of him. Owen had thought the camping trip was a disaster. Harold had thought it was proof he could make something out of nothing. They had been there together and come home with completely different stories. "Why didn't you tell me?" Owen asked. Harold shrugged with the small motion his shoulders allowed now. "I didn't want to be imperfect in front of you." Owen set down his coffee cup. "Dad," he said, "I have spent my whole adult life trying to not be imperfect in front of you." Harold blinked. Renata looked carefully at the notebook. "We are a pair of idiots," Harold said finally. Owen laughed. "Yes," he said. "We are." Harold Baxter passed on a Thursday morning in early November, with Owen's hand in his and thin gray light coming through the curtains. The night had been hard, harder than most, and Owen had been there for all of it. He had not known what to do for most of it. That had stopped mattering somewhere around 2 in the morning when Harold had squeezed his hand, and Owen had understood that doing and being were not the same thing, and that his father did not need him to do anything. His father just needed him to not let go. So he had not let go. Renata was in the hall when it happened. She had come at 4 in the morning, not because anyone called her, because she had simply known. She cried quietly by the door, and Owen let her. And no one said anything for a while because there was nothing to say that would carry the weight of what had just left the room. Later, when the house had grown quiet in a different way, final rather than waiting, Owen found Renata in the kitchen. She was washing the soup pot, the last batch. Harold had not been able to eat it, but she had made it anyway because the smell was something, and sometimes something was enough. "You didn't have to come last night," Owen said. Renata set the pot on the rack. "I know, I want to." He stopped. There was no transaction that covered what he wanted to say. No check, no review, no formal expression of gratitude that would fit the shape of it. "What you gave him," he said carefully. "What you gave us." "I don't have to," she said. "You were there at the end." That's the thing that mattered to him. Owen looked out the kitchen window. The yard was bare, the same yard he had played in as a child, the same maple tree that had been losing leaves since he could remember. He wasn't alone, Owen said. Mostly to himself. No, Renata said, he wasn't. Owen stayed in the house for 3 days after. He ate from containers Renata had left in the refrigerator, labeled in her careful handwriting. He sat in his father's chair. He read one of the crossword books with the larger print, badly, because he had never been good at them, and Harold had always pretended not to notice. He set 2 placemats. He did not know exactly why. He only knew that for a little while longer he was not ready to stop making room for the people he had loved. Months later, Owen sat across from Renata in a small conference room at the county hospital. Between them on the table was a folder, a set of plans, and a proposal for a program he was funding through the hospital's palliative care unit. A program that would train aides and volunteers in what the medical charts could not capture. The crackers broken into pieces, the soup made from a dead woman's recipe, the notebook where a man told his life to someone willing to write it down. He had asked Renata to help design it. She had said yes without hesitation, which was exactly what he had expected. "What do we call it?" she asked, looking at the blank line on the cover page. Owen thought about his father. About the camping trip that wasn't a disaster. About 2 placemats and 45 minutes about baseball and a laugh that sounded like the kitchen used to sound. "The Herald," he said. "Just that, the Harold Baxter program." Renata wrote it down. Owen looked at the folder. Outside the conference room window, the November light was pale and clear and going quickly, the way November always did. He did not feel healed. He did not feel like the story was over or that grief worked the way stories sometimes made it seem, with clean edges and a place where the sadness became something useful and stayed that way. But he felt like a son who had shown up. Late, imperfect, afraid and then present. And he had learned from a young woman with a soup pot and a notebook that showing up, even late, even badly, was not nothing. It was, in the end, the only thing that could not be delegated.